English translation 851st Contact Friday, the 30th of June 2023, 1441 HRS.
Unfortunately, I got held up, so I will be a few minutes late. However, greetings and welcome, Quetzal.
My greetings also go to you, and the few minutes of delay do not matter. But if you want to check immediately because I want some plants that I want you to order, because they should still be planted on the grounds of the center.
As you wish. Here, you must now say what you want planted.
So,
Good. Then I will look for. Here, there are these plants, but what you want, these are trees, rather than just low plants.
yes, that is so, because the center area should contain more trees that will thrive in the future in terms of climate, as opposed to those that will die as a result of the climate, which will also change the vigor of the land in the future, for which you should accordingly take precautions by planting climate-appropriate plants. So,
Of course.
then we have these plants here, which should be enough for now. We will pick out some more later for you to request.
Then I will see that it works out with the ordering, because something always goes wrong with it. Consequently, I have to... You see, it does not go the way I want again. So I have to call Michael again to manage everything.
Do that.
Yes, but first I want to show you this. What I received from my friend Jose from Brazil, and what I put in the next special bulletin and a headline for it. So look here.
Here is something special concerning dear friends from the cosmos and human beings, here on Earth with 6 fingers.
Dear friend, teacher, and true prophet Billy Meyer, dear Billy, my fellow Brazilians.
Brazilian family with 6 fingers and toes on hands and feet.
Subject to this 835th contact report, also with real photos attached below. Conversation between Ta of the Plejarans Federation and Billy Edward Albert Meyer, 835th contact, Nome.
835 Saturday, February 18th, 2023, 1924, HRS, page 3.
Of course, it is not supposed to be anything else, because it all corresponds to honesty and its logic, which does correspond to part of the 12 senses of human beings.
Whereas the Earth humans are only aware of their 5, if I am not mistaken.
You are quite right, but to say something about it is surely as pointless as pointing out that from time immemorial the number 12 has been the value of all things, as well as the fact that the ancient ones who came here had 12 fingers and toes instead of 10. They also mixed with the Earthlings at that time, so that it still happens today that very distant descendants are once again equipped with it, precisely that they are born with 12 fingers and 12 toes. In addition, there is actually a whole tribe of indigenous people living in the jungle in South America, untouched by civilization, whose human beings each have 12 fingers and 12 toes, as I saw for myself when I was there with Svath. Of course, 12 fingers on the hands and 12 toes on the feet are called bodily aberrations, or the like by earthly scientists. It is not known to them, after all, that it is a complete naturalness that was once brought here, and can now and then break through as heredity in Earthlings, whose very early ancestry of parents goes back thousands of years. But this cannot be fathomed, just as it cannot be fathomed that their very early ancestors had mixed with the hereditary ones. As a rule, however, the true earlier ancestry of the ancestors thousands of years ago cannot be fathomed, which leads back to the parents of 12-fingered children and 12-toed descendants. But what do you want when earthly scientists are so lowly intelligent as to claim things that even a complete idiot must realize the imbecility of? This, how it is asserted that human beings originated in South Africa and migrated to the north, to Asia, etc., etc., and Earth's humanity believes this nonsense and does not ask how it came about, that suddenly white-skinned, yellow-skinned, and red-skinned, as well as slit-eyed and otherwise completely different types of human beings arose from it. Even the climate, the vegetation, and the influences of the living conditions of millions of years were not able to bring about such transformations.
14 members of a family from Brazil have 6 limbs on each hand and foot. They make the best of it as piano players or goalkeepers.
A family with a special genetic mutation lives near the Brazilian capital Brasilia. 14 of the 23 family members have 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. The reason for the anatomical peculiarity in the Da Silvas is polydactyly, a rare genetic disorder. When earthly scientists are so stupid that they claim things from which even a complete idiot must recognize the imbecility of the whole thing. In a feature on the British TV program Body Bazaar, the Da Silvas tell how they use genetic mutation to their advantage. Joe Oasis is an excellent goalie. I can hold balls that would escape others. Thanks to the extra finger, I have a better grip, he says.
Making the best of a genetic defect.
His cousin Maria Morena, on the other hand, is musically gifted. She plays the piano and can play more notes than anyone else with her extra finger. My piano teacher is jealous of me because I have much more range than him, the teenager says with amusement. The 6th limb on her hands and feet has become a landmark for the family, Daily Mail reports. Family man Francisco de Assis is called Mr. Six. Every time there is a pregnancy in the Da Silva family, the first question is not whether it will be a boy or a girl, but whether the child will have 5 or 6 fingers on each hand. Clue, Salome, and warm greetings from your eternally loyal Brazilian friend, Jose Barreto Silva. It is better to be eternally slapped by the prophet Billy Meyer's hard, only bitterly true truth than to be fatally kissed by the sweetness and poisonous lie of religions of all colors and denominations. Book OM 32, 1979. To bury the truth, there are not enough shovels to do it. Asterisk and those who try end up digging their own graves. Asterisk note by JBS. Billy Meyer, the true prophet of the modern age.
This is very interesting, although it is not an anomaly, as is probably assumed by earthly scientists and called polydactyly by them. What I see here figuratively points to very distant descendants of foreigners who came to Earth from a distant galaxy many millennia ago, and mated with Earth humans, whose descendants, and again their descendants, etc., passed on physical peculiarities down to the present time, thus testifying to the immigration of foreigners to Earth at very early times.
Something that is still denied today by the smarties of anthropology and other bright minds and smarties and know-it-alls, as well as other negators of truth. Because in reality and in their stupidity, they are only illusory thinkers and incapable of putting one and one together. Besides, there were once the 6-fingered little ones here in the center, who left their handprints on the bonnets of cars and burnt themselves into the paintwork. This is because the little ones of this kind have a kind of acid skin, which means that on our world their touches on earthly materials leave acid marks. We also have photos of this that someone has taken of the acid imprints of the touches. However, these little ones with the acid skin have nothing to do with the other little ones, the Trilans, who come from completely different worlds.
Unfortunately, it will be some time before these smart ones, as you call them, will realize the truth, but that will not happen until... Unfortunately, I am being called for, and so I must leave, but I will be back here in a short time.
Go on then.
15 o'clock HRS, here I am again. It was important that I...
It's okay, you do not have to apologize. In the meantime, I have been thinking about America, because just after you left, my secret phone rang that yes, it was a woman from the USA, and she was complaining as a former German that she was being spied on and harassed by the authorities or something. She complained and asked what she should do about it, etc., so I advised her to go back to Europe. When I tried to comfort her, she said that she would think it over carefully.
Whether she will make the correct decision, however, that will be questionable.
Here I still have this letter, and there is written the question of how I manage to be neutral, since I have to have my own opinion and represent it. And I think that this is a question that is certainly not only of interest to this man, mister. So I telephoned him and said that I will read this to you, and then answer it according to my sense, and consequently, it will then be answered in a conversation report, if you agree.
I have no objection to that.
Good, then I have the following to explain. For my part, I am truly neutral, and consequently have no opinion whatsoever, because such an opinion always implies that a biased opinion is connected with it, in every respect. But since I really do think absolutely neutrally, I have no partisan direction to take in any respect, and consequently also no judgment to make and no saying as to what is correct with regard to a partisanship, and therefore what is of the wrong or right of one side or the other. Correctly, I cannot and must not behave and align myself in this process, but only neutrally ascertain what is actually present and out myself in such a manner that I simply name what is effectively given, is currently happening, or will have this and that effect for the future. And if it is a question of judging any action, thing, or occurrence, etc., then this must be independent of an opinion, but only insist on thinking in absolute logic and realizing that of the whole, the logical result can inevitably only be that which has been logically fathomed. Consequently, this alone proves that having an opinion is based on thinking in an effectively biased manner instead of neutrally, that is to say, on judging one side as good and the other side as bad. This, however, absolutely contradicts neutrality because it does not simply state the existing facts, but favors one party and disadvantages the other. So considered correctly, having an opinion means that the whole thing corresponds to complete partisanship, because an opinion is never neutral, but always biased towards one side or the other, and thus not in accordance with neutrality. Sooner or later, and in any case, having an opinion always leads to quarrels, which not infrequently leads to war between countries and among human beings themselves, often to enmity, hatred, revenge and retaliation, as ultimately to murder and manslaughter, whereby not infrequently everything is controlled in the background by a religiously dependent faith, which stimulates and evokes in human beings ambitions of power theories, possession, as well as of torture, torment, and massacre. And, arising from faith, religious or secular, one opinion is inevitably acute, and that is mainly that evil should be repaid with evil, and that is that like should be punished with like, as it happens, for example, in the case of murder with the death penalty, by which the killing is to be atoned for. In this way, however, every opinion is wrong throughout the lives of human beings, for to have and hold such an opinion is always fundamentally wrong as well as biased, and leads at least to misunderstanding, conflict, discord, then to injustice and inhumanity, to discord, war, and other murder and manslaughter as a result of evil strife, of hatred, revenge, retaliation, or greed, etc.
What you say, I have never given it any thought, because throughout, as long as I can remember, we never learn to think and act other than neutrally. Consequently, we do not cultivate opinions, but only factually.
Excuse me, but with our humanity it is unfortunately different, because earthlings are consistently burdened with opinions, which is why there are always misunderstandings, as well as quarrels and strife, hatred, murder and manslaughter, as well as crime, persecution of people and war, etc.
That is bitter truth in this world, unfortunately.
That is the case, unfortunately. But it cannot be changed so quickly. It will only be possible for the human beings, and they will slowly, very slowly begin to understand everything when faith, religious and secular, finally disappears. In addition, it must still be recognized that overpopulation alone is the true cause of all destruction in every respect. Consequently, it must be drastically reduced. But this truth must first arise in the skulls and brains of the earthlings as a realization. But through delusion and stupidity, the earthling obviously does not yet understand that overpopulation is the true reason for the destruction of the environment, the destruction of the atmosphere, the climate, the ecosystems, the whole of nature and its fauna and flora by the earthlings in the form of this overpopulation. But the truth is that the huge mass of humanity is exploiting the Earth's resources to the hilt, processing what has been stolen from the planet and polluting it. All ecosystems, the atmosphere, nature, and its fauna and flora with the resulting products. The end products created with the resources result in destructive waste, which the mass of humanity carelessly and criminally throws out into nature, thus creating the huge and all-destructive environmental pollution. But to stop this and to make the Earthling aware of it will take a very, very long time and will first bring much disaster upon humanity, the planet itself, nature, its ecosystems and fauna and flora, this alone.
You are not supposed to explain this because you know.
Yes, I know, but in the heat of the moment it just happens. Well, you are right as usual, otherwise I would have to resort to my dots again. But it is also better if I talk about something else, namely what went through my mind after the woman telephoned from America. That she is being spied on, that also happens here, because week after week it happens that was also photographed by, as you can see here, wait, here. Yes, there is one of the photos. There you can see again what happens again and again.
Yes, I know, yes, but you should take the pictures, but...
Okay, you are probably right about that. Then I would better talk about what went through my mind after the woman phoned. But I do not exactly have anything to say about America that raises the USA to the heavens, because I know a lot of things that are not exactly pleasant and that I have known, together with Svath, since the beginning, when America came into being. That is to say, when this land was fought for, and the natives, that is to say, the Indians, were made a pig of, and murdered en masse, usually by immigrant Europeans and their descendants. When I think of Donald Trump, he is not the first president of the USA who was in government as a criminal, just as he is not the first political personality against whom legal and political steps are now being taken, although it is very doubtful that he will ever be sentenced to any punishment in the unjust state of America, and that he will never be able to take over the office of President of the USA again. America's first president, George Washington, was, after all, a murderer who summarily shot a lieutenant of the French before he could even speak a word when the latter, armed, with a white peace flag on the bayonet of his rifle and with 11 men, wanted to ask for a truce. So he was a murderer, as was his father, a wealthy plantation owner who had several thousand acres of land worked by slaves and beat 2 of his 60 or so slaves to death with his own hands. In truth, there is a long and shameful history of the USA, which proves since time immemorial that justice is written tiny in the USA. On the other hand, however, since time immemorial, the state has issued reprimands, that is to say, brought about prosecutions against bureaucratic and political adversaries that are truly horrifying. This has always been done through the First Amendment, and quite quickly after its creation. The reason for this was the fear of U.S. interference when the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts was invoked by agents of France. This law prohibited even then any malicious, false, and scandalous writings that could be directed against the U.S. President or the U.S. government, as well as against Congress. The constitutional amendment thus made any attack, if still justified, a conspiracy against measures of the government of the United States. Consequently, any exposure, however rotten, of machinations, lies, deceit, treachery and underhandedness, etc. of the government and rulers, the military and the intelligence services, is illegal and punishable to the hilt on the part of the ever-present constitutional article. This means that it is dangerous and punishable in America, as it is in the outside world, for U.S. citizens to violate the aforementioned constitutional article, including truth-tellers who are not American citizens and foreign nationals. Many such people are therefore in great danger of being cashiered by America in accordance with this constitutional wisp, as is happening, for example, with Julian Assange, with whom England, the UK, is criminally aiding and abetting the USA in the implementation of the constitutional article, although Assange is a citizen of Australia. However, this does not matter for the USA and England. What is important is that for America, the injustice can be fulfilled, up to and including the liquidation, that is to say, murder of those persons who disregard the constitutional scandal. The unlawful use in this respect, which is contemptuous of every human right and every truth, is a shameful weapon of politics and an example of how a state-sanctioned hysteria is operated by America, which is particularly geared towards suffocating alleged domestic and foreign threats at the very outset and preventing them by all means, with murder also not excluded. The fact that the whole of the constitutional article is a deprivation of freedom, a suppression of freedom of opinion, and an unparalleled suppression of truth is tacitly accepted by the people of America, because they have no other choice. Otherwise they will fall into the mills of persecution, which may mean liquidation. The claim that the constitutional article would serve U.S. state security and U.S. government policy is nothing more than a lie and also an example of the fear of America's government that the hegemony mania and war mania, as well as the insidiousness of the U.S. state leadership and the powerful of the shadow government in this respect, would become widely known among the dumb-held population and create turmoil. It is also sadly the case that critics of U.S. government policy are at least muzzled, if not murdered. Lies about external foreign powers have been spread, and these have been hostilely slandered. This as hostile, lying, and fraudulent disinformation has been raised since ancient times. At the time of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln ordered newspapers to be shut down, while arrests were even made of congressmen, as well as civilian persons who disagreed with the sleazy machinations of the government and military. Then the USA military entered the First World War, 1914, to 1918 in reality. However, the First World War had already taken place from 1756 to 1763, caused by America, which of course has always been denied, but which is deliberately and falsely simply called the 7 Years' War, and thus the truth is concealed, in which all the major European powers fought for balance of power and territorial gains. The fact that the truth is concealed is the usual thing, in which they actually had no business being involved, and which obviously happened for purely hegemonic reasons. In addition, the Americans alone also brought the Spanish flu into Europe, which cost around 2.5 million human lives. Then Congress passed a new sedition law that banned offensive statements, namely profane, scurrilous, or disloyal speeches, or simply remarks towards the military or the U.S. government. This law, which was used with incredible vehemence in lies to imprison, for example, Eugene Debs, who was running for president for the Socialist Party. He was put in prison from where he then championed his candidacy. The U.S. then, through the U.S. military intervention, actually war supporters of WW2 accused opponents who did not participate in WW2 as a so-called fifth column working for the government of Germany. Then later, in the Vietnam War, as in the Iraq War, as in America's military interventions in other states where the U.S. intervened, opponents were monitored and harassed by the U.S. government. If critics of U.S. foreign policy appeared and continue to appear, then they were considered to be criminal critics of the U.S. government. This because they were targeted as a result of their opposition to the government's rotten policies. And this is also the case today. For example, FBI Director John Edgar Hoover targeted the civil rights movement by wiretapping and harassing Martin Luther King Jr., and then having him secretly assassinated, as the Plejarans were able to discover when they investigated the truth at my request. It was also the case that Hoover kept files on those he considered to be agitators and rebels, not stopping short of spying on musicians himself and putting them on his red list. But what is also to be said? The presidents of the Democratic Party as well as those of the Republicans have even used the tax authority to make a mess of their political opponents, as for example when President Clinton was supposed to be removed. In drafting the constitutional article and the Constitution itself, those in power knew how everything would be handled and always acted upon strictly in order to retain power and use all possible means against their opponents. Therefore, they also devised a limited governance in which might could be absolutely controlled. The American politicians of the first period, when the constitutional articles were created, forced the righteous to give in to it, namely to use the law as a weapon against the people and their opponents. Since then, everything has been expanded even further. Consequently, the growth of governance has turned into the final construction of unrighteous governance. This has led to an unelected and unlawful handling of the bureaucracy and leadership of the USA, and this is the role that is being played in the USA today. America as a state is today pursuing its own agenda in addition to that of its people, and it is doing so ruthlessly against the effective reality of any desire for peace and the other desires of the American people. The American state, that is to say, the American government, is working to infiltrate, harass, and eliminate all those of the population and all states of the world who oppose its agenda of terror and violence. That the effective government and the shadow government of the USA are using tactics ranging from worldwide persecution to assassination of those, whether American-born or other nationals, who expose the truth of the U.S. government, the crimes of the military and the legislation and governance and its delusions of hegemony, etc. That is a fact. What an American person told me in the early 1980s, whose name I'm not allowed to mention, which I promised her, when I met her in Dusnang because she was supposed to shadow and spy on me, but then sided with me in terms of opinion, is the following, which I cannot reproduce exactly, but in essence when she said, "While I myself am an American, I must advise the human beings who want to lead and live their lives in real and true freedom. They should not come to America, and not trust that they can find and have in the USA what they really desire. They only find out the real freedom that America offers when they want to live it and experience what is really behind it all. What is the effective truth and reality?" This is what the man said, arguably voicing what is being operated by the government and shadow government using the aforementioned article of the Constitution. For it is not true freedom that is being promoted and practiced, but strict slavery with harsh constitutional articles. As effective slavery was practiced, and was common practice at the beginning of America, whereby not only human beings in Africa were robbed and enslaved, but effectively also white people. But this is hushed up to this day, which goes as far as farce and even insidious murder, as happened, for example, with President Kennedy. Human beings should be very vigilant and ensure that they do not act against the limits set by the official government and the shadow government of the USA through constitutional articles. Otherwise, not only mischief, but much worse will flourish. The lying assertion that the government and shadow government of the USA is pursuing and exercising a policy of peace and free trade, etc. abroad is an unparalleled lie, because it is not the promotion of peace and freedom that is being pursued, as this is not happening in one's own country either, but the delusion of hegemony, as a result of which America has already spread and taken up residence in almost 1/4 of all the states of this earth, and is directing what has to be according to American systems. For example, the possession of firearms in the private sphere is so free and permitted that countless murders occur every year in the USA's own country, in those states where the acquisition and carrying of weapons is indispensable or permitted by law, that everyone is allowed to defend their own land and their own house with a weapon, if someone so much as sets foot on it. Even children shoot their parents, friends, and acquaintances in ignorance and carelessness of the use of weapons, whereby a pistol, a rifle, or a revolver is regarded as a toy. This, however, as well as deliberately out of hatred, wantonness, or simply those who are regarded as enemies, superfluous, annoying, or inconvenient, as well as innocent human beings are simply shot in assaults or quarrels, etc. This is America as it lives and breathes, in addition to what is commonplace and unjust with regard to the underhandedness and meanness of the aforementioned constitutional article, the application of which is not only persecuted in America itself, but is even applied worldwide in a very sleazy form. One only has to think of Julian Paul Assange, unlawfully held in Belmarsh prison in England awaiting extradition to America, and Edward Joseph Snowden, who has sought refuge in Russia. In the case of Julian Assange, the U.S. is demanding extradition because he published secret documents about the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. What is happening to Assange is what the USA's constitutional article does to persons who express a certain political opinion and do not agree with what the USA government and its military and the U.S. Secret Services are doing, not only in the USA, but uninhibitedly in all countries of the world, so also in neutral ones. The U.S. wants to make an example of Assange, and they want to silence him by locking him up forever, or murdering him, then mendaciously claiming that he killed himself, that he died of heart failure, accident, or illness, etc. This is intended to silence all whistleblowers. This is to stop all whistleblowers, as those who openly disclose government, military, and intelligence secrets are called, from going public to freely and openly disclose what the secrets of the U.S. really are regarding the wrongdoings of the U.S. government, the U.S. military, and the U.S. intelligence agencies active around the world. The message is clear. If someone dares to do it anyway, the person concerned pays a very high price for it, up to and including their treacherous murder. The events surrounding the Assange and Snowden cases affect all whistleblowers, but it also affects journalists and private individuals who dare to openly speak the truth about America and its constitutional article of shame, or cooperate with whistleblowers. But it also affects people who support whistleblowers or other persons who take a closer look at the truth in any process. The dirty hammer is that foreign states secretly or openly sympathize with America and punish and persecute their own citizens for U.S. demands. It is not only the human beings who are in danger when they tell the truth, but also those journalists and the press who are dedicated to the truth. In the case of Edward Snowden, it is to be said that, as an American, he was a former U.S. agent who worked as a technical specialist for the U.S. intelligence agencies CIA, NSA, and DIA. He revealed that the NSA can circumvent certain encryption techniques and effectively weaken standards in a targeted manner, worldwide and thus globally, which also concerns the Internet and all telecommunications, which are monitored in particular without suspicion. However, according to your Playaran's knowledge so far, this does not yet affect every form of encryption possibility, as Bermunda has told me.
I am not knowledgeable about that because I have not dealt with the history of America. But I do know about the misanthropic and underhand machinations of the state leadership, the army, and the shadow state leadership.
America's medical companies and corporations are also criminal in nature, so it's not just the government, the military, and the shadow government, and the U.S. intelligence agencies. That much of the disaster also emanated from America is slowly being publicly proven. So far, unfortunately still not, that many corona sufferers were only inoculated with soluble distilled water at the beginning of the epidemic, and still some months after the effective spreading of the pandemic in a criminal and money-grubbing manner. This is what I wrote, but afterwards is the article that Akim emailed me. The following article clearly confirms all the fraud and money-grubbing and sleazy machinations concerning the hasty and ineffective vaccinations against the corona rampantly spreading disease, as Figu has reported and exposed from the very beginning.
Weltwoche on the COVID lie slap in the face of the majority media author, Uli Gellerman. Date, 27.06. 2023.
After all, after long years of pharmaconformity, Roger Kuppel, the editor-in-chief of the Swiss Weltwoche, had the courage to confess, "I slept the sleep of the self-righteous C video." For the Weltwoche had also gone along with the customary lying about corona. But in another issue of Weltwoche, there was a sensational breakthrough to the truth. The Rational Gallery proves this slap in the face of the majority media with quotes from the newspaper. It is not about a medical debate, it is about the basic questions of freedom and democracy. This is also proven by the manipulative ghost hand that interferes in the debate when you call up the Weltwoche video, which wants to dictate to users how they should think. COVID-19 current scientific information can be found at the Federal Center for Health Education. Against all freedom of press and opinion, a German authority intervenes in the reporting of a Swiss medium.
For the video. The following are quotes from Weltwoche.
These were horror days for the EU and great moments for the truth. First came the now famous confession of Pfizer manager Janine Small before the European Parliament. On the 10th of October 2022, she admitted that the vaccine had not been tested to stop the transmission of the virus before it was injected millions of times. Already nasty jokes are circulating. There are two mice sitting there. One says, "Are you going to get vaccinated?" Says the other, "Are you insane?
The human experiment is still going on.
Covidiots get it right. 3 days later, on the 13th of October, the European Commission confirmed in an official hearing that vaccination did not protect against transmission or infection. We will come back to this.
Finally, 1 day later, the third piece of bad news. The EU Public Prosecutor's Office is investigating Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
She is accused of having arranged overpriced deals with the pharmaceutical industry to the detriment of the EU and the taxpayer, and of concealing the incriminating news. A single one of these reports would be a medium earthquake. All of them together are the super GAU for the EU. But not only for them, the narrative of the panacea COVID vaccination, to which manufacturers, scientists, and governments worldwide have paid homage, is collapsing.
Conversely, it turns out that the critics who have been called cranks, conspiracy theorists, or, most charmingly, covidiots have been proven right.
Their hunch was correct. Vaccination is not only not the promised panacea.
It is a classic non-valeur. It costs taxpayers billions without bringing any corresponding benefit.
After the latest revelations, the history of the corona pandemic and its management must be rewritten.
But those responsible and their accomplices in the media are doing everything they can to stifle the reappraisal. If you vaccinate yourself against measles, you are protected.
Those who vaccinate themselves against corona are obviously not protected.
Media outlets remain silent.
This goes as far as outright censorship, as I have experienced firsthand. The facts and context described here were also the subject of my column Dr. Good on the online network of Portal 24.
I linked the article on the business platform LinkedIn and on Facebook.
But after only 2 hours, it was over. The posts, which had been diligently read and shared, disappeared silently from the social platforms. Who is afraid of the truth? Where do we actually live? China is apparently in Europe. And what are the journalists of the big media houses doing, who have done their best to stir up the virus panic and have received millions from the state for the vaccination campaign, and further millions in COVID aid in return?
They remain silent and consistently blank out the bombs that hit Brussels the week before last.
According to the logic, what we don't write about doesn't exist.
At the same time, they boast from Swiss radio and television to Tamedia and CH Media of spreading facts instead of fake news and of standing for relevance.
Fiddlesticks.
Protective argument doesn't hold water.
Instead of enlightenment, lights out is the order of the day. Those who react at all to the groundbreaking revelations choose the following fallback position. We never said that vaccination protects against infection and further spread. It merely serves to prevent severe courses.
Wrong! There may have been individual virologists and other experts who expressed themselves more cautiously.
But the message of jubilation that was proclaimed with bangs and trumpets was, the COVID vaccine is the great breakthrough.
It protects against infection and transmission. Now we can get the pandemic under control. There is plenty of evidence for this from Switzerland, from Europe, from all over the world. Swiss Federal Councillor and Health Minister Alain Berset, the country's top corona crisis manager, tweeted on the 12th of August 2021, "Vaccination against corona protects against infection, the spread of the virus, and against a severe course of the disease."
And on the 18th of November 2021, the Federal Office of Public Health FOPE put the protection against infection at 90% even with the booster. Anthony Fauci, anyone who is vaccinated can be sure that he or she will not be infected.
Vaccination is a promise of salvation.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen blew the same horn.
In her declaration on advancing vaccination of the 25th of November 2021, she claimed, "Vaccination protects you and everyone else." With a booster vaccination, we would have to ensure that those vaccinated so far remain immune.
This was precisely the promise made by the responsible politicians to promote their vaccination campaigns. Those who are vaccinated are immune. Vaccination protects. Vaccination benefits.
Yes, I am really amazed at that. It seems unbelievable to me that someone still has the courage to uncover the truth and even spread it through the media and make it known. That is really amazing.
There are also still Earthlings who have the courage to tell the truth, and even to write and publish it.
I do not have to look far because there is someone sitting in front of me at the computer. But now I have to go because despite my idleness, I still have something to do. So I will end goodbye, Edward, my friend. You never cease to amaze me, also with all the things you have experienced and learned together with Svath. Goodbye.
You have also known him.
Of course, that's true, but he never told me anything about what he and you did together. What I know is only from his annals that Ptah has spread about our world. But now I really want to go. Goodbye, dear friend, which you have truly become to me.
Thank you. Goodbye, Quetzal, my friend.